Hello and welcome back to my channel. Now it's been a couple of weeks since I've posted a video on this channel. That was mainly because I had a pretty important exam I had to study for. I did the exam last Wednesday and I passed, so obviously I'm very happy about that. It was a practical exam with simulation patients. I felt confident enough that I was going to pass the exam, but I was still pretty nervous about it, and I'm glad it's out of the way. And also that meant I didn't really feel like making booktube videos, and I've always said to myself that I wouldn't make videos if I wasn't feeling up to it. But now I have some more headspace to make some videos again, and I thought I would start today by catching up on some reading I've been doing in the last couple of months. I'm not going to talk about all the books I've read, just because some of them were just fine and I don't have much to say about them. Yeah, I think I'll just go through them in the order I've read them. So I'll start with... Okay, the camera just fell down. I have no idea whether we are still in the same position, but there we are. I'll start with A Little Luck by Claudia Pineiro. This is translated from the Spanish by Frances Riddle. I read this with two friends from Instagram. We have a very casual book club together. At least I'm calling it a book club. We haven't had the official talk yet. But yeah, they'll get mentioned again later in this video. It's my second book I've read by Claudia Pineiro. Like a lot of people, I have read and loved Eleanor Knows. I don't know if this is her most recent book, but it is her most recent English translation. I'll start by saying that I really love this, and I knew I was going to love it from the first paragraph. I had the same reaction reading Eleanor Knows, just knowing you are going to be in good hands reading this book. The first scene of this book is very striking. Someone is sitting in a car waiting at a railway crossing. The barrier is down, the bells are ringing, the lights are flashing, and they wait 2 minutes, they wait 5 minutes, they wait 8 minutes, and no train comes. And then the first car in line goes around the barrier and across the track. And then that scene ends, and already I was like, holy crap, what is going to happen? And then we move to the main part of the story. Set in the present day, we meet our main character, Mary Lowen. She's been asked to do a kind of audit at a very prestigious school in Buenos Aires. She actually lives in the United States right now, but you learn that she used to live in Buenos Aires and had also worked at that particular school. But for some reason she has left Argentina and like changed her name and changed her appearance. Something happened in her past that made her leave everything behind. And now she has to go back and kind of confront her past. And then throughout the book you get back to that one scene at the train crossing, and a little bit gets added to that scene each time. I don't want to say much more about the plot and what the book is about, because I think it is best to go into this book as blindly as possible. Not only what happens plot-wise, but also what themes get explored in this book. But I can tell you that this book is a lot more layered than you might think at first glance. It obviously has a tension and a haunting quality to it, but it is at the same time also very introspective and reflective, and it gives you things to think about. Yeah, it was great to discuss this with some other readers because it has a lot of things to unpack. So yeah, definitely worth your while. I think I like Eleanor Knows a little bit better, but it's very close. The next book I wanted to talk about is Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. I read this for the BookTube Prize, and I've had mixed experiences with Anne Patchett before. I really loved Commonwealth, but I also read, I think it was State of Wonder, and that one was just so-so for me. So I went into this with pretty neutral expectations. So I'm happy to say that I ended up really enjoying this. I listened to this on audio. It is narrated by Meryl Streep, so of course I had to try that. And then I read along with a print copy as well at the same time. So yeah, it was like a full immersive experience, and I think that definitely added to my enjoyment. I didn't speed up the audiobook in any way, so it took me quite a while to finish the book. But it was actually really nice to spend such a long time with the characters in the book and just get really immersed in the story. The book is set, I guess, in late spring or early summer of 2020. We meet Lara. She's a middle-aged woman who lives with her husband on a cherry orchard in Michigan. They have 3 grown daughters who don't live at home anymore, but because in the spring of 2022 everything was in lockdown because of COVID, all 3 daughters are actually at home. I think mostly because it was nice to be around family at that time, and living on a farm means they actually have quite a bit of space, which is nice in a lockdown situation. But also they could help out with the cherry harvest. The usual personnel wasn't able to come in, so they all have to pitch in and help with the cherry picking. So in this book we spend a lot of time with Lara and her daughters cherry picking, and her daughters beg her to tell this story of when she used to date a now very famous actor. So when the 4 of them are doing this quite menial job of cherry picking, Lara begins telling that story. When she was in her early 20s, about the same age her daughters are now, she spent a summer in Tom Lake, Michigan, playing the lead role in a summer stock production of Our Town. Now, in case you are wondering if you actually need to be familiar with the plot of Our Town, the play itself, I'd say no. I honestly didn't even know it was an actual play that actually exists and is actually kind of famous. Whoops. So yeah, you don't need to know the plot of that before going into this book. And during that summer, Lara begins dating Peter Duke, who played her male counterpart in that play. So Lara just tells about how she got the part in that play, how rehearsals went, how she started dating Peter Duke, and eventually also how they drifted apart. And it sounds kind of boring and uneventful, and I guess maybe it is. There isn't all that much happening, there's no big dramatic reveals, and it's all quite pleasant and charming, and I think in another writer's hands this might have gotten too saccharine, but Anne Patchett has a way of telling a story that feels so natural and easy. You read this book and you actually forget that it is written. Pairing that with Meryl Streep's narration, this was just such a wonderful reading experience. It was just such a joy to be in this book. I didn't always care that much about the plot. I thought Lara was quite a bland and frustrating character sometimes, but it didn't bother me that much because the writing was so well done. I liked the subtle way it talked about memory and reminiscing. about the difference between a youthful love and a marriage, and how parents will have had a life before they had children, and how for every child that's always a revelation to discover. It's about family and sisters and what role everyone plays in a family dynamic. It was just a lovely book. Was it perfect? No, but I just felt nice and calm and grounded reading this book. So yeah, that was Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. Then I also read The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. This is a classic, or a modern classic. It was originally published in 1905, and I read this the same way I did Tom Lake. So I read it with my eyeballs and my ears at the same time. And again, I think that really added to my enjoyment of the book. The narration was by Lauren Lefkoff, and I thought it was brilliant. I was just so enraptured by this book. I did not expect to like it this much. It is the story of Lily Bart. She's a woman in her late 20s, and she lives her life among the social elite of New York at the turn of the 20th century. She is considered very beautiful. She is often the life of a party, and she naturally draws people to her. But she also doesn't really have any money of her own. So she wants to find a rich husband so she can keep up with her rather expensive lifestyle of going to functions and charity events and wear all the latest fashion, and in her circles the ladies would gamble at card tables. She's from a wealthy family herself, but her mother squandered away all of their fortune, and when both of her parents die, she doesn't really have any money left. She has an aunt who takes her in and gives her like an allowance, but she's desperate to find someone who will provide for her. But on the other hand, she also doesn't want to compromise and settle for someone just because of the money. She wants the love and the romance as well. Obviously, this is a story about a very specific small layer of society that didn't have much to do with the majority of people. I mean, God forbid you should work for your money. But I did love having a glimpse into that world. I think Wharton describes it so vividly. So we follow Lily Bart throughout life, struggling to keep up appearances, dealing with men who will take advantage of her when she's at her most vulnerable, finding out who her real friends are and who are her fair weather friends. I found her story so compelling. I was so invested in it. She's an incredibly frustrating character. She's arrogant and entitled. She makes stupid decisions because she thinks nothing and no one can touch her. But yet she doesn't have that ruthlessness to really make it in this society. So eventually that small touch of innocence and kindness in her will lead to her downfall and will make her such a tragic heroine in the story. She's a very fascinating character, very well drawn, much more complex than I expected. It's rare you'll meet a character like Lily Bart, and it's definitely a book that I won't forget soon. Next is The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, and the setting of this could not be any further away than The House of Mirth, although I guess they are both about the failing of society. This is a dystopian story. It was first published in 1993, but the story actually starts in July of 2024. So in a way, this book could not be more timely. It is set in the United States on the West Coast, and in Butler's version of 2024 there's a lot of scarcity. Water is more expensive than food, of which there isn't enough either, and just resources of any kind are hard to come by. There's a drug going around called pyro, and people who use that drug are get almost like an orgasmic kick out of watching things burn, so there's a lot of arson. It's just a very scary and chaotic place to live in. And Lauren, our main character, she's a 15-year-old girl, and she lives in a small gated community. These are places where maybe 10 or so families live in a neighborhood surrounded by high walls, and within these walls they live a relatively safe life. At least they have a roof over their head, they have some space to maybe grow some food, but there's a constant threat from outside the walls, because people are so desperately poor and hungry that they stop at nothing to be able to get something that will help them survive another day. And Lauren knows that it is only a matter of time before the walls are broken down, and she needs to prepare to survive in this outside world. Amidst all this chaos, Lauren writes in her notebook. She is trying to make sense of the world around her and find meaning in it. So she writes about Earthseed, which is a religion she is developing around the idea that God is change, and people are able to shape themselves and thus and also shape their God to grow in new circumstances. I guess any religion was or will be created as a way to make sense of the world around you, and Lauren really feels called to write down her understanding of this religion in her notebooks, which she calls the books of life. And she always becomes this Moses or Jesus-like figure, like a prophet who gathers more and more followers around her and leads them to a new world. Honestly, I don't think I've even grasped a tenth of what Butler is trying to say in this book. I've read this book with an online book club, and we still need to have our discussion, and I'm very curious to hear what other people have to say about this book, because I feel like I barely scratched the surface. Would I recommend this book? I'd say tread with caution. It is incredibly dark and bleak. Check the trigger warnings because it has them all. I mean, this is a world where it is literally kill or be killed, and it's grim. But if you feel like you're ready for it and you are in the right frame of mind, I think this is a great book to sink your teeth into. Like I said, I barely even made a dent in what you can unpack from this book. So yeah, that was The Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. It is part of a duology. The next book is called The Parable of the Talents, and I've heard that it was actually supposed to be a longer series, but the author decided to not continue it because even she herself just felt too overwhelmed doing research for this book. So yeah, if you want to have an idea of how bleak this book is. And the last book I wanted to talk about today is Waar, liever, niet, denk, or What I'd Rather Not Think About by Jente Posthuma. This was actually on my radar for a while, but I guess sometimes a book has to be translated into another language and then get nominated for a prestigious book prize to give me that final push to read it. This is another book that I read with those two same friends I read A Little Luck with. We were actually supposed to meet up today, but something came up, so we postponed it to next month. After we finished our last book, we thought it'd be nice to read another book in translation, and we decided to wait and see what will be on the International Booker long list. And we ended up picking the one book that we could read in our own language. This is about a young woman who has a twin brother who has committed suicide a few years back. And it takes a little while to figure out how this book is structured, mainly because it kind of lacks any structure. I guess the main character is writing this a few years after her brother died, and she's now noting down all these memories and anecdotes she has about her life and her relationship with her brother. Some of them are from their childhood or later in life, some are from before her brother's death and some after. And these are all vignettes. Some are not even a page, others are at the most 2 or 3 pages. And they seem to be kind of in a random order. At first it feels like maybe she's building up to the event of her brother's death, and that maybe she'll be more reflective in the latter half, but that doesn't really happen. It almost feels like all these anecdotes can be mixed up and put back again in a different order, and it would still be the same book. And I think the author did this on purpose, because she's depicting a character that is grieving, and there is no linearity to grief or to memories. There is no logical order of events that will lead up to her brother's suicide. I guess the main character is trying to make sense of her brother's death, but she can't pinpoint to one anecdote that would explain it. So the order of her memories doesn't matter, because they are all equally important and unimportant. I really enjoyed the writing in this. Her voice is very clear and precise. I was really happy to be able to read this in Dutch, because I think there's a subtleness to the language I'm not sure translates well. But yeah, do let me know if you have read this in English and what you thought of the translation. Because of what the book deals with, it is obviously incredibly sad. The anecdotes that the main character shares are not all sad, of course. In fact, some of them are very sweet or funny. But because you know what will happen, they can be so bittersweet, and it just hits harder. I've seen some comments that some people found it distasteful that the author uses examples of the Holocaust and Joseph Mengele and also 9/11 in this book, and I did note that as well. I think those parallels could have been left out. I don't think they were distasteful necessarily. I just don't think they were necessary. I don't know. They didn't add much, I guess, and I wasn't sure what the author is trying to say with them. So yeah, there's that. Overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I was really moved by the words on the page. Yeah, those were all the books I wanted to talk about today. Like I said, I've read some more books, but these were the ones I thought were worth talking about, and I also think are worth your time reading. Have you read any of these books? If so, I'd love to hear your thoughts, or if you haven't read them, let me know if you are interested in any of these books, or just tell me about the book you've been enjoying lately. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.